Hi, and welcome back to Higher Hertz. My name is Justin Leopard. I'm your online cello teacher, and today is kind of a part 2, building on what we had talked about last lesson with scales, how to play, arpeggios. Arpeggios are almost as important as scales. They are just as important in defining what key center you're playing in, and practicing them can reveal certain other things that we want to practice anyway, most notably shifting, and also the type of intonation that has to do with the two notes that you're playing. We'll get to that in a second, what I mean by that. So what an arpeggio is, if a scale is where you play all of the main notes in a key center, an arpeggio is where you just play the absolute most important ones for defining the chord. What I mean by defining the chord is chords come in a lot of different flavors. For example, a C chord could be a C major chord. It could be a C minor chord. There's other ones too. It could be a C Lydian chord. It could be some sort of extension, some sort of 7th or 9th chord. It could have a flat 5, but it'll be otherwise similar. All of these things affect the function of the music, what the chords make us feel. And although most commonly there's 2 flavors that chords come in, major and minor, those are already quite meaty topics, worthy of practicing every day on the cello. So when we're playing, for example, the last video we talked about a D major scale, we're playing all of these in-between notes as well. We're playing all of the notes that just come in the key of D without any alteration. If you have a D major, 2 sharps in your key signature, and then you put a note on every single line and space of the staff without any alteration, those are all the notes in D major. So when we're actually playing an arpeggio, what we want to do is only play the root, the 3rd, and the 5th, and the octave, of course. So we're really only playing 3 notes, but in multiple octaves. And that's an arpeggio. Took me long enough to get to that, right? The way that we want to practice these, we'll start by going in the same order as the scales that we had discussed last time. But then I want to talk about where arpeggios can really lead to. So if we're just staying in the same hand positions that we were in, then the D major arpeggio is open 3, open 4. Just alternating the notes with the octave. So it can be helpful to practice this the same way. Start with just a whole bow. And the reason why this is just as important to practice as scales is because it's in music a lot. There's a lot of times in music where you're going to be playing an actual arpeggio, or you're going to be playing a melodic pattern that involves skipping in that sort of arpeggiotic fashion. So you might not always find in your melodies, but if you're going to find some alteration of that, you're going to sooner find something where you're basically playing a combination of a scale and arpeggio. For example, let's go down an octave. So we'll do 1 on the C string. This is low D. And remember that when we do down here, we have to extend our fingers, and we do that by bringing these 3 up a half step and leaving the first finger where it is. So this leaves the pattern for D major scale being 1 extended 2 extended 4. And it means that the pattern for our arpeggio is going to be 1 extended 4, 1 open D, 3 open A, 4. Okay, and same thing for C. C major, we're going to do open 3, open 4, 1, 4, 2. minor, it's even easier to go to minor with arpeggios than it is for scales, because we don't have to worry about going up differently than we're coming down. All we're going to do is play it exactly the same. The only difference is that the third is going to be a half step lower. So we'll go 2, extended 1. All right. We didn't talk about C minor last time, so hopefully this is helpful for that. Let's go to F. So F starts on 4 on the C string. So with F, hopefully you've noticed one issue that can happen with arpeggios is that there's these sudden shifts you have to make. And this is the reason why arpeggios warranted their own video, because while a D major 1 octave arpeggio, you know, maybe that's fine to play just with the same fingerings that you do the scales. In general, arpeggios are actually played with a slightly different fingering, one where you try to preserve the 3-5-1, so to speak. So if you have 1, 3, 5, 1, because that is the only shape that's really going to be universal. If it were minor, it would be an extended one. And what's beautiful about this hand shape is that it's the exact same notes over and over again, just in different octaves. Like I'm saying, as you continue to play up, right? So if you go, and then instead of playing the open A string, shift up to 4th position, which you guys know is my favorite, first finger right above the thumb, and play the same thing, 1, 4, 2. So we had 1, 4, 2 here, and we have 1, 4, 2 here, and they're the same notes, okay? The same fingering even. And since we're gonna have to be shifting up to get that high F anyways, we might as well be shifting up earlier and making it easier on ourselves and being able to do a shift that isn't just glaringly on its own. All right. Now with F, we kind of have to make this decision because otherwise the alternative is kind of gross. But you can also apply this fingering to the ones we've already talked about. For example, with C, put your first finger where your third normally goes. You'll have an E. And this is actually called second position because it's where it's a little confusing on cello, but the second note, which is played with our third finger, is where second position is. If you were to do the half step, it would be called low second position, I think. At a certain point, you actually stop thinking in terms of position naming so much, and you just start thinking in terms of what sort of, what sort of half step interval you are. You end up starting to think in terms of frets mentally after a certain point with cello. So anyways, we can apply this same fingering one of two different ways. The 1-4-2 fingering, that is. So we do open C, and then there's two different places that we can go to in order to play 1-4-2 again. The most obvious and easy being shift back to first position and do 1-4-2. That was the fingering we were doing anyway the first time. Sorry about that. Okay, now there's one other fingering that you can do, which at first is going to seem like, why would you want to do that? But I'm going to explain why this is important, and that's why this gets a whole video. So you can also shift up to first finger here. So it's actually not even fourth position, it's actually a whole step beyond that. So apply the same principle. Where's the third finger there? That's where your first finger goes, okay? But once you start getting higher, you start shifting to a different finger pattern. Anyways, 1-3-2 once you get above fourth position. Now, why would you want to go up that high to play a C major scale? Well, think about what's going to happen when you want to play higher up in the register than just 2 octaves. I mean, 2 octaves is not that big. You know, if you get like a very tiny keyboard, that might have 2 octaves. That's tiny, right? It's just not the full range of music. And so, when we play these instruments that basically have a 2 octave range, in first position, you have to shift up higher in order to get those higher notes. So if we play C major only in first position up until we need to shift, all of the other notes, we're just shifting up the A string. Let me show you. Now those are a lot of shifts, man. I mean, I was mostly in tune because of a lot of years of experience, but like, where do you even begin to learn how to actually shift to the right note each time and not have it just be completely random and haphazard? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is by shifting up using the same fingering pattern each time, by shifting up the same interval each time. This is actually going to be one of the things that does help you to play high up and not have it feel like, it's the end of the world. So just watch how elegant by comparison this fingering is. Okay, so you can start preparing yourself for these 4 octave arpeggios early by also practicing this fingering, this 1-4-2, or this, if you get higher, 1-3-2 fingering. Practice it for your major and minor scales. So let me show you G, and I'll show you how to do this. First, I'll play a G minor scale, and then I'll finish by playing a G minor arpeggio. And then you just incorporate it into your scale practice like that, okay? Now, again, as you're gonna be playing more octaves, it's not gonna make as much sense to use that fingering, even though that fingering is fine for doing 2 octaves. Even with the shift up, you're just shifting up to 4th position. But again, the sort of better way to think about this in the long term is it's also just going to help all of your notes be a little bit more consistent sounding, because switching from a fingered note to an open string is actually often a jarring difference. So even in these easier keys, ultimately what professionals end up doing a lot of the time is not even using the open strings, always doing some other fingering, because this open string is first finger 4th position on the C string. I mean, that's true for all of them. They're the same note. So you don't have to ever play open strings, and starting to practice this fingering is going to be one of the steps that you can take in the long term of learning cello to be able to do that. Now, as you keep practicing, whatever scale you're practicing, play the arpeggio for it. So as you keep practicing it, and as you start trying to learn scales in other keys, just also incorporate this arpeggio practice. It'll save you headache down the line, and make sure to spend as much time going down as the time you spend going up. Musically, I would say things would start at the top and go down in pitch, either, if not more often, then at least as music gets to be what most people would consider better, music will tend to do that, because it just something about starting from the bottom and going up sounds like you're playing a scale, whereas starting from the top and going down sounds more like you're just gliding with the music. So composers tend to choose that. So it's just as important to practice going down as going up, and even to start practicing just at the top and coming down, so that you can practice finding those notes and not feeling like you can only play them in the context of the scale. If this sounds like a lot, that's why I do encourage you to practice scales every single day and arpeggios every single day. It's a lot, and it seems like it's something simple, and it seems like it's something that is boring until you actually start to see the effects. And the effects are going to be that it's going to be super easy for you to learn rep compared to your peers who aren't practicing the scales. So that's just the truth of it. You can take it or leave it, but I would highly recommend you to practice scales and arpeggios. In any case, that's all I have for today's lesson. Subscribe and hit the bell below for higher hertz for more cello lesson videos. Once again, I'm Justin Leopard, and you can find some of my playing on the Vagabond Cellist channel here on YouTube. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching.